Hey there. All right, we are live. At least I think we are. Let me just double check here and see what's going on. All right, we are live. That's good. And let's make sure we're on YouTube, on Twitch, and on X. Okay, I think we are good to go. So maybe we figured out this whole streaming problem thing here. All right, well, I am Jeremy Daly. I am the CEO and one of the founders over here at Ampt. Just a quick background on Ampt if you're not familiar with it. Ampt is a tool that lets you deploy your workloads to AWS without needing to use complicated configurations or needing to manage the infrastructure. So basically what we do is you write application code, which is basically any type of application code you would normally write in JavaScript, JavaScript, TypeScript, anything Node. You get a Node environment. You use our SDK to define different types of handlers, like a task handler and some of these things. It does all the work for you. Of course, we support Next, and we support Fastify, and Astro, and Express, and all of these other frameworks that you're probably super familiar with. Plus, of course, you can integrate with basically anything you want to. So all kinds of interfaces we provide out of the box, but then third-party interfaces are all there as well. Anyways, so that's Ampt, and we're going to jump into it, and we'll do some pretty cool things. But today, we're going to talk about Next.js. So Next.js, if I'm assuming most of you are probably very familiar with it, so we can go to the main Next.js site. So the React framework for the web, I'm not a big React fan. I don't know. I'm a little more old school, so I come from the hypermedia sort of days. Did a bunch of stuff with Vue, which I liked. I like the interactivity stuff. I mean, there's a lot of cool things you can do. But Next is very, very popular. It's a great framework. It contains all kinds of features that you can use. So again, I'm not a Next.js expert, but I do know the basics, and I'm going to walk you through how you can set up a Next.js app or how you can use Next.js app and deploy that directly to AWS using Ampt as the service, the automation service that will allow you to do that and have that up and running in your AWS account. Okay, so let's start here. Let's go ahead and open a new, if I can find it here, open a new, hold on, bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to open a new VS Code window over here. I'll bring it over there. Okay. And so let's set up a new React project. So if you have a Next.js project. So if you have an existing Next.js project, you can go ahead and bring that in, and I'm going to show you something kind of cool. So we'll start with the create React app, or create Next.js. I keep saying React. The create Next.js app. We'll use that to create a basic Next.js application, which we can run locally and test, and then we will Amptify that application so that we'll configure it so that it can be deployed to AWS for us. Okay, so let's see, find my mouse. Okay, so we're going to go over here, and I'll open up our terminal, and then I'm going to go into git/sandbox, which is just a directory I have on my machine, and I'm going to make a directory, and let's call this Next Ampt demo. How about that? Okay, cd into Next. Oh, I got a whole bunch of them in here. Next Ampt demo, like this. All right, and then we can do code dot like that. Okay, so we are now in this empty directory called Ampt Next Demo. And by the way, please feel free to comment. You can ask me questions about Next.js, and I probably won't be able to answer them, but I will show you some of the basics here, just about how you can use it to interact with your Ampt environments when you deploy it into AWS. So, okay, so we're going to create. Let's see. So I want to create a new Next.js app, and the way that you can do that, I think if you go to their docs and their installation getting started, they just have this npx command that we can use. So let's go ahead and use this. We're going to run this, and it's going to ask us some questions. What do we want to name our project? We can name it My App. That's fine. Yes, let's use TypeScript. Yes, let's use ESLint. Obviously, yes, let's use Tailwind CSS. Do we want to use a source directory? Yes, we do. Do we want to use the app router? Yes, we do. Do we want to customize how we import or default import alias? No, we don't need to do that. So this will go ahead and install some things for me in this My App folder here. Okay, so give that a second to finish doing all the things that it does. And there we go. Okay, so now we have this. So I'm going to cd into my app here, and then we'll reopen this. And okay, so now we have this my app main. We've got this whole thing here, like that. And we should be able to, whoops. Okay, so here are all of our, again. All right, so if we go into our package.json file, it's pretty simple setup. They give us the next dev server, the build, and so forth. So let's just go ahead and run npm run dev to go ahead and run that dev server. So this will create a dev server running on localhost. If you're familiar with React, you already know this. Sorry, I keep saying React. Next, you already know this. Okay, so here's our little Next app that's up here and running. If we want to get started by editing this source app / page, we can go into source page here, and then we get this. Let me hide this. So we get this here. So let's go in and find something. Let's see, find information. So there's some links there. So let's get rid of this buy. Here, we'll get rid of this little buy versus sell thing here. And we'll just say hello Ampt. And again, this is a local dev server. So when I save this here, we'll see this immediately update, which is really, really nice. And so anytime we make changes to any of these things and save them, they'll immediately get updated. Okay, so this is great. We can even build the app if we wanted to, but we need somewhere to put it. Obviously, Vercel is a choice. You can deploy this. I think you can use, I think Amplify has it, has support for Next. Netlify has support for it. So there's a couple different places you can do that, and they all have their separate trade-offs and whatever you want to use them for. But what I want to do is I want to actually run this on Ampt, and I want to take advantage of all of the cool things that we can do with Ampt and all the backend capabilities and all the integrations and all that kind of stuff. And we want to be able to use the workflows as well because they're very helpful. So, all right, so I'm going to exit out of the dev server for now. And then what I'm going to do is I have Ampt installed globally. So again, if you npm I at ampt/cli-g like that, that'll install the Ampt CLI globally for you. I guess I could run that, doesn't really matter. So now I have this, I have my Ampt CLI available to me. So now when I run Ampt, what this will do is this will go ahead and, again, ask me for an organization. So I'll put this in my demo. And then this is sort of the Amptification process. So it'll say, we've detected a Next.js project. Do you want to install the Next.js adapter for Ampt? So yes, we want to do that. And then the other thing it's going to ask me to do once it's done installing this, let me open those there. Once it's done installing this, it's going to ask me to make some small configuration changes that will allow me to run this on AWS. So it's to set up the project for Ampt, and so I'm going to say yes. Oops, go back to here and say yes. So what this has done is it added build and dev scripts as well as the Next.js entry point. So if we go back into our package.json file here, and bring this down a little bit, we'll see that what we have is now a Ampt dev and Ampt build. And so the Ampt dev just runs the Next.js dev server in the Ampt context, which gives you access to all of the remote resources in your developer sandbox. So you can access data and parameters and events and all that kind of stuff is all built in there that you can access. And then we installed that dependency here, which is the Next.js dependency. And then finally, we have this entry point.mjs that it's added here for us. And the reason why this is important is because we need, let's see, entry point, if I can find it. Oh, right there. Okay, blind. And this just imports our Ampt adapter, the entry point that does what it needs to do in order to actually run Next.js, the Next.js server on AWS for you. Okay, so we're still not done yet because it's going to ask us to. Oops, should have asked us to name our app. Maybe I clicked away from it. Hold on one second. Let me try that again. Oh, and enter a name for my app. Okay, so let's call this Next Live, or how we call it, Amptify Next.js, like that. Okay, so what this is doing now is this is now creating an app in Ampt for me. And again, Ampt is the sort of service coordinator here. So this maps to all of your applications that are running in all the different AWS accounts that you use. This handles all of it automatically for you. Like I said, we've got centralized management for secrets, and we've got CI/CD built in and all those other things. So this just takes a second, but this is spinning up a completely separate dashboard, or sorry, completely separate developer sandbox for me that is giving me all of those isolated resources that I can use now with my Next.js project. So as soon as that is done, looks like I have a new version of Chrome available. Oops. Here, finishing upload. This is usually a lot faster, but there we go. Connecting. So we're connecting to real-time logs. All right, so now we have this fantastic MVP set up. So I can open this, and this is going to tell me that, or it should tell me, that there's no Next.js build available. So I haven't built my Next.js site, and that's one of the key, so no Next.js or Next.js build not found. That's one of the key sort of components that the Ampt Next adapter adds. So when you install the Ampt Next adapter, you get this Ampt Next feature that runs the build within the Ampt context for you, which allows it to set it up exactly as it needs to be set up to run on AWS. By default, the Next.js apps that we deploy will run in Lambda functions, right? So that's what it is used as the server. So similar to Open Next and some of the other things. But what else it does is, again, because Ampt can switch the compute behind the scenes, we can actually move this into App Runner and things like that. So if you have a really high volume Next.js app that's getting a lot of traffic, you can do it this way. And of course, it's all integrated with CloudFront, so all the caching and all that kind of stuff works as well. Okay, couple of things that we need to do. Because we do deploy this into, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just going to do this now so I don't forget. We do deploy this into a Lambda function, and Lambda functions are limited in terms of size and how much they can actually do. When you basically compile a Next.js app, it is a very, very large, it's got a very large footprint. And so just to be safe, we don't need the React and React DOM to be dependencies. We just need them to be development dependencies. So I'm going to move these down here into our development dependencies just so that when it actually builds, it'll be conscious of that fact. We are in the process, we do build containers automatically for you when we deploy to App Runner. So this is something that actually AJ Stubenberg has done quite a bit of work on this, where the cold starts when you deploy to Lambda functions using containers as the packaging format can actually be lower depending on the size of the app that it's running, because it can reuse all those chunks across the way that it assembles or the way that it loads it in using, I don't know, there's a whole paper on it. It's very cool, but so that's something that we've been thinking about doing as well, because when you're running a larger app, you shouldn't need more than, I think it's 250 megabytes or something like that is a limit, or 75, maybe it's 75 megs for the limit of the app itself. That's not including static assets or anything like that. None of that counts towards it, but it's certainly something that we think, if people go over that a little bit because they're doing a lot we give them some freedom to do that and then optimize it past there and do some route splitting and some other things that we'll do to optimize it as well in the future. But anyways, so we're going to do that. We're going to save this here. Now, the other thing I want to just point out too is if we go to go to their docs, and we go to, I'm going to search for this so I can find it. So deploy ignore like this. So one of the things that we want to do is, close that down, is, oh, I didn't find the right one. Try that again. Deploy ignore. This right here. Okay, so when you deploy, there are certain things that you don't need in the artifact that actually lives, that gets deployed to the Lambda function. And one of those things is the source directory, so that you clearly don't need. So we're going to go into over here. We're just going to, this says React app, but so we're just going to create. Try that again. Create a new file, and we're going to do .deploy ignore, and in here we'll just put this for we'll call this our next app like that. And then we actually have another, why did it do that? That's weird. Some weird formatting happening there. That's fine. So save that as just /source like that. And then the other thing we can do is we have another thing called that we can create for Ampt ignore. And the Ampt ignore just allows us to ignore different things. So if we want to get, like this has a Git repository associated with it. Over here we can see it's got a Git repository. So we don't want to sync the Git information at all. We don't need any of that information. So over here we can create another file called .ampt ignore. And we can put in here .git because we don't want that. Okay, so that should get everything all set up. So we should be all set up to run on Ampt now. All right, so we haven't built anything. So before we do that, I just want to show you quickly that if we just run dev from here, this will go ahead and now run this localhost 3000 here, which is this one here. So this will run this now in the Ampt context. And the reason why this is sort of, is important is because when this is running in the Ampt context, now when this actually builds, when it does something, it has access to your backend, or it has access to your developer sandbox. So if we wanted to import, let's do params, and params from params is not right. We want to do that from @ampt/SDK. All right, we should be able to do that, and I think we have this installed. If not, we can install @ampt/SDK just so that we have that. And that is a runtime dependency, so we would want that not as a dev dependency. So we can install the params there, and then we should be able to up here in this home function, if we wanted to, I'm going to just do a log, and then I'll do params.list like this, and save. And now we are getting, because the site refreshed, we are getting this list of parameters here. So this is coming from the back end where these parameters are being pulled down for us. So if we wanted to pick one of these, like for example, we'll just say the Ampt URL. So we can go ahead and load the Ampt URL like this, and then we should be able to do params, and then somewhere in our code here we can say hello Ampt, and then we'll put our thing in like this, and then we can go ahead and comment this out because we don't need that, and then we should be able to save that, and then we'll be able to see this here. So this is running locally, yet it's accessing information that is unique to the backend that I'm working on. You can do this with data and some other things as well. And then this all translates when it does the build, you have access to the same information, same stuff. And then of course, we'll do some stuff with server actions and I guess React server components and what's old is new again. So we'll do all of that stuff, and we can go over that in a minute. So all right. So anyway, so we now have Let's see, we've got our local thing set up. We still don't have anything running in here. We still see this is our developer sandbox URL unique to us. I'm going to build in that in just 1 second, but I want to show you this as well. So I'm going to click open, and this is going to take us into, let me sign in here. That is me, signed out. Try this beautiful new design that Google has. Cancel. All right, so this is my Amptify Next project. So I've got all kinds of projects that I've got in here, but this is the one that we are working on right now. So again, every one of these blocks here, basically, these are separate AWS accounts. So when I click into this, this is a completely separate AWS account that I'm accessing right now, with its own set of data, with all its own logs, with all its own metrics, deployment information, all kinds of stuff like that, that's all tied to this completely independent account. So we can do some really cool things here by having that isolation. So, all right, so we've got this all set up. And now let's go ahead and see what it looks like when we build it. So Next is a little bit strange compared to some of the other frameworks we do. Like you build something very specifically for the Next server, and the way that kind of works is that goes into a different. You overwrite the static, and there's something basically. You have to stop the dev server here. Most frameworks that we support, you can just run build while you're running the dev server, and that will go ahead and build it, and it will sync, and everything will work fine. I'm not sure why Next kind of mixes the two things together, but we can type in build here. And this will go ahead and run that ampt-next build, which then essentially just runs next build for us. So this will create the optimized production build for us, which will just take a few minutes. One thing that is good about Next is it has a local cache that it uses to do the builds. So when you're building this, locally, it'll cache that and do that. There's probably something with the way they do the builder functions and other services. The way our builder functions work is it's a fresh build every time. It's a clean environment. So Ampt builds do take. I'm sorry, Ampt builds. The Next.js builds do take about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes or so when you're deploying those to a permanent stage or preview. So anyway, so this has gone ahead and says that it rendered everything. It did it as pre-rendered static content, which is fine. And if we jump over to this now and we refresh, this will go ahead and load that Ampt app for us. This is the development sandbox. Again, a lot of data that's being loaded here. The cold starts are pretty good when they once it's into a production app, but because this is a dev mode, it loads a little bit more slowly. But basically, you see that this has we have all the information running like we did before, and this is all this is now running up here. Now, if we go and we view or inspect this here and close down what's new, go to the network tab, and we're recording, so we refresh this. Oops, we're going to do all right, so we get this here. This is all loading right as a file. Now, one thing that you'll see, I want to be clear on this too. So the cache control header here, you'll see is max age 0 must revalidate. But if you see down here the X cache control here, so this, yeah, that's the one, right? Is it that one? Yeah, it's that one. So this is what would normally be sent from Next.js. We intercept that for the purpose of the developer sandbox. So if we were to, let's go ahead and try this. Let's type in share. So this is going to create a shared version of this for us in the background. And hopefully I've got it all configured right so we don't run into any deployment size issues. So again, like I said, this is going to take a little bit of time. So while that's doing that, let's just talk about, we can actually dive into some of the things that we want to show with that you can do with Ampt and Next.js. So all right, so if we go into the create next, no, where do I want to go? Getting started. All right, so one of the things that is really cool about the way that this is built. Well, first of all, the app router. So the app router is just built in. I don't know if people are still using React. Was it React router or something like that? But I have a feeling that I mean, maybe if you're building a React app directly, but I think the app router is sort of taken over at this point. So everything with the app router, but that's all fully supported and so forth. That's cool. But then the other thing is the suspense stuff. This is really cool. So if you're not familiar with Suspense, again, let me go back here. So I guess loading and streaming UI, all kinds of interesting stuff you can learn. But so there's this main sort of loading, wrapping thing. Do that. But this is the thing that is really cool here. So if you take something like you take a component, so this post feed, whatever that is, and you wanna load that after the page loads. Then how's this doing, by the way? Oops, still going. You want to load that after the page loads. Then so you basically stream some you show the first bit of content, and then it will populate these things afterwards when they're ready to go. And that uses a combination of streaming and suspense and the fallback and all kinds of stuff like that. That, again, they're called boundaries and all kinds of stuff like that. I'm not a Next.js expert, but this stuff does work, and it works really, really well in Ampt. So let me just double check here. Okay, so this deployed. So now I've got a new version of my app that's up and running in a sandbox. So now again, this is Pleasant Source. Let's load a different file and so forth. This is loading in a completely separate. And if I go back here, we can see it. Go here, go back to this. So now I've got two separate environments. This environment is completely independent of this environment. And this is sort of like a snapshot of what I've just done. And so again, I can share this URL with stakeholders or whoever, and they can sort of play around with it. So this is this here, and then if I view if I do the inspection here and go to network, all right, so we refresh this. So this uses this Pleasant Source here, and then now we'll see that the cache control is set to 31 blah 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 whatever. So essentially this is going to this document is static, right? This is not going to change every time we refresh this. This is loading a static document. Right, loads very, very fast. It's what's the 77 milliseconds or so in order to load this page. But there's nothing really exciting happening there. There's no sort of dynamicism. I keep saying words on here that I can't pronounce for some reason. Anyways, very cool, and you can play around with this and again share this with somebody else. But this React app is not, or this Next.js app isn't doing anything exciting yet, so we want to make it do some exciting things. So we talked about this, so let's do the suspense stuff. Oh, and one other thing too that I should show you. So Ampt supports multiple runtimes. So if you come over here and you look at the Ampt runtime, essentially our runtime is, again, it's support for Node 18 and 20. It does automatic TypeScript transpilation, so you don't necessarily have to build TypeScript separately. You can just put in TypeScript code and it will do all of that for you. It does that hot reloading in dev mode, which we've I think showed before. Which of course is one of the coolest features. Has a standardized web API. Standardizes fetch and stream, so you can use things like Hono and Elysia and stuff like that. It does have the streaming support built in, and then some consistent format for requests for different event sources. So very cool. But you can control the runtime version. So by default, you're going to get Node 20. But there are reasons why you might say, well, I had something that needs Node 18 or something, or maybe some backwards compatibility. So you can come over into your package.json. And you just go to your Ampt section right here, and then you can go ahead and you can actually specify. So let's just drop back down to the Node 18 runtime. You'll see that it says the runtime config was updated. And then if you usually just exit out of here. You don't have to, but I always like to sort of be proactive. So we'll go ahead and do this. By the way, I think one of the reasons why it took so long to sync originally was because we were syncing all of that Git code, which is just the entire Git repository. So that we don't want to sync the Git repository to our developer sandbox because that's just a lot of extra stuff that we don't need. And it doesn't help with the build or anything like that, right? Those just storing your local stuff. So, all right, so here we are. So now we are switched to node 18. Again, you can be on 20, it doesn't matter. But well, depending on what you're doing, maybe it does matter. But what I want to do is I want to do something interesting with this. So I'm going to copy, actually what I'm going to do is, let's see, do we have a service that we can use? All right, let's do this. We're going to come over here. And like I said, not an expert with Next. So there's probably better ways to do these things, but I'm going to create a components directory here. And then in here, I'll create a feed.tsx file. And then in here, I'm going to, if I remember this correctly, I want to create a component. So let's call this const. No, I gotta export this component, probably. Yeah. So all right. So I'm gonna do export default. Oh, I guess I don't know. I wouldn't do it that way. I'd export that at the end. Oh, I can do it this way though. So many different ways to do these things. So I can do export default function feed. Oh yeah, that's it. Fill in for me. You should be filling in for me. And then I can return see div, and this is a delayed. What do I want to say? This is a delayed response or something like that. Or maybe say this is a suspended response like that. Okay, so clearly this isn't going to do anything exciting yet, but we'll do this so that we now have our feed here, and then we can go into our page, and we should be able to import feed from components feed, and then somewhere here, let's do, I'm not showing very much stuff. I'm gonna, let me hide that so it gets more space. Oh, is that too small? This is just too big for me. I don't know. If that's too small, let me know and I'll make it bigger, but it's just easier to see. All right, so that's the image that's running there. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and add a div here, and we will use our feed component like this. Okay, so now we got the feed component there, and then what we're going to do is, just so we can see this in real time, which will be a little bit easier, I'm going to run the dev server down here and come over here and go back to our local host. All right, and we should see, let's see, is that not loading? Why not? Let's get rid of this image so that's not in our way. Absolute 300. Okay, I'm not gonna. I think if I just put this up here, maybe it'll be better. Oh, I know why. Did I not refresh this? That's why. Okay, that's why. Okay. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so now I've got, I guess I can get rid of all this other stuff too, right? We don't need all this junk. This is, just making things messy when they don't have to be. Suspended response. I don't want that gradient on the background thing. All right, let's just take out some of this BG gradient and the backdrop blur. It's all wonderful stuff, but I don't want it. And then why is that all the way down the bottom? There, div, feed. Sorry, I'm just trying to clean up all this. L auto rounded, LG, dark zinc. Okay, what? I'm just gonna, oh, that's actually not, that's not what I wanted to be editing. I wanted to be editing justify columns, flex columns, min screen. All right, you know what? We're gonna make this even simpler. I'm just gonna delete all of this. How about that? And then, how about this? This is a suspended response. Okay, so we're getting that background thing. Oh, that must be from our layout. Okay, that's what's getting me here is the layout thing. So body, children, globals, CS. Okay, so there's a globals somewhere around here that's probably doing that background, body, background. Okay, I don't want this. I don't want this. I'm going to hit save. Okay, all right, that's a little bit better. And then I'll go back to my page here, and I'll just do class and, React, class name, and do padding 10 like that. Okay, now we've got our, this is a suspended response. Okay, so now this is obviously not a suspended response because it's just returning immediately for us. So I'll actually add another div in here and say hello, something like that. Click save. All right, so we got hello, the suspended response. So now what I want to do is I do want to wrap this. Well, before I do that, let's actually make it so that this takes a little bit of time to load. So we'll go into the feed here, and I'm going to import, let's see, set timeout. Yeah, set timeout from timer promises, and then I'll make this an async function like that. And then in the feed, we'll do await set timeout, and I'll do 2 seconds, so it's there. Okay, so now if I refresh this over on the right, we'll see that this is loading, and then it loads. Okay, so the whole thing loads at once. If I were to view the, I guess they might not be able to see it with the local dev server, but so essentially what this is doing is this is just waiting. When I click refresh, it's waiting the entire time to load that, right? That's not what we want. So we want to add in the suspense boundary. So come in here and do suspense. I don't have all the React plugins that I'm sure all of you do. Okay, so we're going to do this suspense here, and of course we have to import suspense from React. Okay, and then we want to do a fallback like that, and we want the fallback to say div loading like this. Okay, so we do that, and now this will say loading, and then it will give us that suspended response. Okay, so now if we want, I'm going to stop my dev server here, and I'm going to run build. Now again, you don't have to do this. I mean, when you're developing, right, you would just stay in this mode, and you'd be playing around with the React. The dev server, right? That's the, because you need to be switching back and forth. And that's actually one of the really cool things is that if you did have something that was being accessed, that was remote, data, any of those sort of things, you don't have to build it. You can just use the local React server, and it will interact with those backend components automatically for you, which is pretty cool. So we've gone ahead and built this. This is, I believe, our fantastic. And by the way, if you ever need the URL, you just type in URL here, and it'll tell you what that is. So this is the fantastic MVP right there. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and we will see in a second. Again, in the dev environment, it takes a second to load the first time. So this will load, and now again, we didn't see anything. We didn't see the streaming stuff work there, but if I refresh that now, we'll see that it says loading, and then this is a suspended response. And if you go and we look at the timing here, we can see that there's a waiting for the server response, and then we get that, and then it waited that 2 seconds in order to serve up that data for us. So this is all built in. Nothing special you have to do. Just do it like you normally would do it. All right, so we got a few minutes left. So that's I'm going to go ahead and now let me try this. Actually, I'm going to run. So what do we call our? Let's see. I'm gonna update our existing sandbox here. So a couple of things you can do is you can keep generating new sandboxes every time. That's perfectly fine to do. Or you can actually reuse these. You can actually name your sandboxes too if you wanted to. Not your sandboxes, your previews. So when you type in share, you can put a name after it. If it already exists, it'll say, hey, I already exist. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes, I do. So if you wanted to do something a little bit simpler, like, preview or share stage or share, some some git git commit or something like that you wanted to use, you could do that as well. So that just gives you sort of the flexibility for kind of naming things the way you want. Now, if you plug this into CI/CD, it'll automatically do it for you, and it'll create preview environments based off of pull requests, and you don't have to do anything special. Okay, so let's look at some other things with this while that is building in the background. So one of the things that we can also do with this is the server components. So let's see if I can find it here. Components. Is it server components, or am I thinking of server actions? Sorry, yeah. So server components you can do as well. Everything by default is a server component. Actually, I'd be interesting to see. Hold on, that's almost done. Because you're generating things dynamically versus statically and some of these other things. So I'll wait till that is finished. But let's talk about server actions for a minute. So server actions. So this is something that changed, I don't know, I think relatively recently. I don't know if this is Next 14 or when this was introduced. Maybe Next 13. I guess Next 13. But the thing that's cool about server, what are they called again? Sorry, server actions, is that you don't have to write API calls to mutate data, which is pretty cool, because the old way of doing it sort of was like you had to have a form that hit a particular route that then made like an API call. It was a lot of different stuff. With here, it's a little bit easier. So by the way, this says that it was updated, which was that pleasant one here. So we can refresh this, and we will see as soon as this loads that refresh this and okay. So this is interesting. Notice that this is a suspended response is just loading immediately, and that's because of the way that we are building it. And when we saw here, when we ran our build here, everything is being built as pre-rendered static content. So what's happening here is that when it is generating this particular page, and again, if we go in and we look at the page itself, we'll see that the cache control is immutable, and it's this long cache thing. So this page is not giving us streaming because we didn't necessarily tell it to give us streaming. There are some things within the Next docs here, if you go and look, that talk about, let me just search for streaming here. Streaming. So in order to tell it that it has to generate a something that will not be static. Let's see if I can find it here. Somewhere in here. But essentially you have to write like, maybe search for SSR. You need like something that reads cookies or some of these other things. I'll find it. No, somewhere in here it talks about it's under app router, loading UI, middleware internationalization. No, that's the loading, linking, error handling, redirecting. Like I said, not an expert on this, but it's in here somewhere. But essentially, in order for you to do that, you have to tell it that it's got to load these things dynamically from the server. So the way that we can do that is you either include in your feed here, you include something like it's either a cookie or you're reading a header or there's something else that can trigger that as well. So that's one way that you can do it. Or the other thing that you can do is you just do export const revalidate equals 0. So if we do this revalidate equals 0, and then I'm going to go ahead and share this again. Yes, I want to overwrite this. Then what this will do is this will tell the server that I shouldn't cache that in fact is going to be processed on the server every single time. And I think that ends up making the whole page dynamic. Maybe it doesn't. React is, or Next is does a lot of optimizations on the front end. It does it all for you, which is pretty cool, in terms of how some of that stuff works. So I believe when you do that, it might cache the page itself and serve that, but then it knows that it has to feed in, it'll render everything else and make sure that that's static. But I probably should have built it locally so we could see that it was building differently. So we'll let that deploy. But let's go back to server actions here. Server actions mutations. Okay, so basically what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to mutate, and I'm not gonna do all the Reacty stuff and whatever. I mean, if you want to do some basic React stuff, like what are they use client stuff? Let's see, somewhere on here. Server actions. No, sorry, server components. All right, so if you want to use clients, oh, here it is. Oh, okay, dynamic functions, right? This is what it is. So cookies, headers, or search params, something that tells the system that I need to get this data from the server. Then it will automatically flip it to use the remote capabilities for, or automatically make it dynamic, right? Or you use that revalidate thing. So if you're not using any of these, again, it's just sort of a way to do it. All right, so that's published over there. So if we refresh this now, we should get, let's see. Okay, so refresh. Okay, that's still not working. It's still building it all together. So I'm going to build this locally just out of curiosity and make sure that it is in fact creating. It's highly possible I did something wrong. Like I said, not an expert. Okay, so it's still 100% static. So did I, oh, you know what I have to do? Okay. I think I have to do, yeah. Okay, sorry. I can't do this in the, see, people who know better would tell me, but I can't do this here. I need to do this, sorry. I need to do this at the page level up here. Try that again. All right, so if I rebuild this, let's see. This should now make it dynamic. Make sure that is in fact true. There we go. Now I got dynamic rendering using Node. And the reason why it works on in the Cloud Sandbox is because it's revalidating everything every single time. So it's automatically revalidating. But so let's go ahead and share this again with that. So we'll rebuild that again. Okay, so we'll get back to that. Server components. Actually, I wanted to show you one other thing quickly, which was why I was here in the first place. Okay, caching, client components. This is what we want to be on. Okay, so client components, adding interactivity. All right, counter. All right, so I'm going to copy this here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new component, and I'm going to call this component counter.tsx, like that, and I'll paste this in. So this will create an interactive counter for us, right? And if I go over to my page and we maybe do it up here, we will just go ahead and drop this counter in like this and that, and it should automatically do that. Thank you. And then I'll go over into the counter here, and then we've got no styling here, so I'm just gonna do a class bg blue 500, and again class name, yes, sorry, 500, padding 3, and color, text white, like that. And then we'll just do this as class name, text XL. Is that the right thing? I think it's, maybe that's right. Okay, so anyway, so this went ahead and rendered. So let's try it again, refresh. Now we get our streaming that's working. So yeah, it's just a matter of how you build it. But that's all built in, it's all supported, and you can play around with that. Okay, so now what we've done is we've added this counter here. So I'm gonna run the dev mode again, so that we are in our dev mode. And again, like I said, this workflow of me jumping around and deploying and testing, it's just to show you, you would typically just be working in your local dev server, connected to your remote sandbox, and all that stuff would work for you there. So, okay, so I'm running the dev mode, so find this here. Okay, I'll refresh this. And we should get this button. So now we've got this button that's interactive. Obviously, you saw this thing working there as well. So again, you can add all your interactivity there. One thing we could check, I don't know, just thinking about this for a second here. So again, this will show you, if we go to the timing, right, we've got, the first initial thing, the content download. If we refresh this again, right, should be a little bit faster. Okay, 186 milliseconds, so forth. So this is doing all that stuff for you. And then I'm assuming that a lot of this stuff, this first part of it is probably cached from the server, and it pulls it from the cat. So all this stuff is meant to be optimized, so some of that stuff works well for you. All right, just want to show you server actions quickly, and then we can wrap it up. But let's see. So server actions, so that's the use client stuff. We talked about that. By default, everything is server side. Again, if it has something that needs to render something dynamically, it automatically does that for you. And then the last thing is just server actions. So server actions and mutations. So this is just actually really, really cool how this works. So let's find the example here. Behavior examples. Okay, so forms, right? Great example for how you might want to do this. So copy this here, and I'm going to bring it over to my page like this, and I'll paste this at the bottom and then move some stuff around. Let me make this a little smaller. Okay, so we want to take this first part here, which is this, and we're going to export. We're going to have this function here called create invoice form data. This is going to tell this particular function to use server, which makes it a server action. And then if we come down to here, we want to take this form, and this is a pretty cool how all you have to do is essentially just say, I'll put this form above here. All you have to do is just tie action to create invoice. You just name it after the function. Of course, you can format this. I'm sure there's much better ways to format this than the way that I would be doing it. So anyways, we want to create this invoice. Looks like it is spitting out all this stuff automatically for me, which is great. Amount status. So this is saying input type, customer ID, amount type, status, and a submit button for create invoice. Okay, cool. So we hit save over here, and then we come back to this that we have running, I believe. Yes, okay, so customer ID, amount. All right, that was kind of crazy that is wrapped like that. So let's just put these in some divs so that we can make them a little bit easier to see. Div. Pardon my super advanced Java, HTML stuff here, and status, and then there we go. Okay, so that should do this, and assuming that works. Okay, so now we've got this, and of course there are no, okay, sorry, one more thing, and then we'll do what we need to do. So class name, I'm just going to add a border to these. And yes, you can do these in global styles, and you can do whatever you want to do to make these work the way you want to work, but I'm just going to do it simple like that, and we should get that. Okay, so now we have all these. So now if we inspect this, again, this is a local, so I'm not sure This will give us as much insight as we want to see. But if we type in some numbers here and then create invoice, this will send a request to localhost. The payload is what we want there. And the response just gives us some stuff that is not for us, it's for React. It automatically, or for Next, it automatically handles that stuff for us. All right, but we didn't see anything exciting happen there. And that's because I did make the call, but where did that route actually get created, the whole deal? I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to log the raw form data that it is assembling here like that. And then down here, we get real-time streaming logs when we're working in our developer sandbox. So this is making a server request to the remote system, and well, so this is using the local version of it. So this is just accessing local, but it has access to the remote. So if I type in some stuff here, test, and I hit click me there, oops, wrong one, create invoice, then we'll see that this data comes through like this, which is pretty cool. Now, we're not doing anything with this data, but we could, right? So if we wanted to go ahead and do import, and we'll do data from Ampt data, and then we'll make sure that we have it installed, install at ampt/data like this. Then we can actually take this raw form data, and then what I'll do is I'll say const result equals await data dot set, and we will set this with the customer ID. So we'll do raw form data. Now again, you would definitely need to validate this and make sure that it is all what it needs to be, but we're going to set this as the customer ID, and then we should be able to then just actually, because it's going to be that, we can just send in the raw form data like this. Okay, so we've done that, and then instead of logging that, we can actually log the response, which is going to tell us what came back from the server. So now this is where it's interesting, because now I'm local. And sorry, this is just bothering me that there's so much space here. I'm going to do this form, this form, and I'm going to do class name, and then margin bottom, let's do 12, just so there's some separation here. Okay, and that create invoice button, the fact that it's not actually look like a button is also driving me nuts. Okay, so anyways, so my customer ID is going to be test123, and then my amount is, I don't know, 25, and status is pending or something like that. And then I click create invoice like this. And so what this has done is this is now sent the now. This looks exactly the same, but it's actually not. I should do this so I can let's spit out the metadata. So let me do this again. So I'm going to create this invoice again. So this is actually interacting with the server and giving me this information. So even though it's local, it's a local server action, because of the way that Ampt works, you have access to your remote environment. And then because you created that here, if I go into my sandbox and into this here, make this bigger so we can see it, get all items, and now I have this test in here that is actually saved in my data. And again, what's cool about this is happening from the local instance of this, which works really, really well. So all of that stuff is great. Okay, so then one other thing that I guess that's kind of it. We're at time. Let me just do this. I'm just going to run a deploy, and I'm going to deploy this to prod. So I'm going to put this into a production environment. As soon as I click that, we'll see that over here, we get this new prod environment that is being built right there for us. So again, each one of these are all separate AWS accounts that it's plugged into. They're all running in the my default region that I've chosen, which is US East 1, because I'm on the East Coast. But you can select, you have the option here to go to your regions and change. Oops. and change your region to be a number of different regions that you would want to use. So so I'll let that deploy. And what else can I tell you? So give Ampt a try. It is, you can go in. I should show you this actually. You can come into your settings here. I'm not sure why my setting page is not loading for some reason. Let me just go to account, sign out, and then I'll sign back in. Sometimes my loader gets out of whack. Let's see, where was I in? Next, Amptify. Oh, no, that's not the one I want. I was in Amptify Next. This is the one. Okay. Got too many demo projects going on here. So if I go into my regions, again, my default region is here. I can override this particular region. But with the Git stuff, right, so I can connect to my Git repository. I can say, oh, this is the one that I want to use here. I can confirm that I want to attach that. This links me to it and then gives me the option to enable preview deployments. So on every preview, something would happen. I can set up my push deploy. So I can say whenever somebody checks something into main, then I want to push that to prod and do it that way. So all of that stuff is configured for you, and you don't have to, that's it. And now I've just set it up so that if I do a pull request against my Next.js project, this will automatically rebuild for me. It is pretty cool. So I'm actually going to remove this and unlink this because I don't even know what repository I just linked it to, but that's fine. And then while that was going, this should still be going. So again, it does take a while to build these, which is a little bit, but again, there's a lot going there. I'm sure there's other ways that can be optimized. But so now we have this new URL, again, completely independent URL that is just for my production environment. Okay, grab the words there. So again, I refresh this and we see that, you got your loading there. This is the suspended response. I've got all my interactivity from my client-side components. I can go ahead and say test 1 and then, whatever, 15 and settled or something like that. Create this invoice. This went ahead and created that, and I didn't have any interaction or anything to show it, but essentially this submitted this payload to this form here. And if I go back to my Ampt project and go into the production environment now and look at the data and do get all items, now I see that customer, that information was there. And if I go and again, just go back to this and I submit something else. So test 1 is the customer ID. And again, obviously you want a better schema than this, but I'll just do, 100, whatever, some larger number, settled X, hit the wrong button again. I click there, I come over here, and this information is automatically updated here, right? So now I have this there. So you can interact with that, with your back end. You can do server actions. You can do suspense boundaries. You can do the streaming support. All of that is built in there. And what's cool about this is that if you are running like a high velocity sort of, front end, if you've got a Next.js app that's getting a lot of stuff happening. Oh, I should also show you this. I think this is, I guess, the last thing that I kind of missed, is that, again, the headers for some of these things, right? So the header here is this particular page doesn't cache, right? Because it is, because we told it not to, but it will, everything gets cached in, CloudFront, and all that's taken care of. Every time you deploy, we clear out the cache automatically for you, or clear out the edge cache. So it all runs there. So everything does home run back to a Lambda function right now. We're not doing some of the edge function things, but again, the edge function is a little bit more complex when you're doing interactions with data and some of those other things, all stuff we're working on. But again, we're trying to make the best experience for you on AWS to run your Next.js app. So give it a try, play around with it, tell us what you like, what you don't like, and we'd love to know your feedback, because all of these things that you can do with Ampt, triggering tasks, triggering events, parameters, and the other thing I didn't mention, one more thing, sorry, I know everybody wants to go, we all got busy days, but the other thing is that this entry point, the reason why this entry point is important is because in this entry point, this is essentially saying any request that falls through go ahead and send to go ahead and send into the Next.js server that will go ahead and process this for us. But if I wanted to do something else here, like I wanted to import the SDK, oops, not the SDK, I wanted to import, I don't know, let's say, let's say data, right? So let's do this quickly. Not from there. We want to do it from the Ampt, from Ampt data. So I could do this as the SDK if I wanted to. But then I could do a data.on and basically say when anything is created in the system, I want to have an event that gets triggered here, and I do this, and I'm just going to log out created and the event that was created and save that like that. Now, this is why this is cool, because now in my local sandbox, I think I'm running the dev server still, right? Yeah. So go back over to the dev server, and this is running. Yeah. Okay. So now, if I go ahead and type in test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't remember what I put in here before, some number there, and then I create this invoice. So not only will this create the invoice and give me that response there, but then what will also happen is we'll get a trigger that is detecting that something was now written to the database. So now I can write all kinds of workflows off of that as well. So I can extend my Next.js app with the normal functionality of interacting with things and so forth, all running in the same account, all super fast, right? And of course, I can do anything here. I can trigger a build that will, pull data from a content management system, and I can pull, I can do anything, right? So you just have a lot of capabilities, and you use the full power of Ampt and AWS behind the scenes to do all these things while running your Next.js app efficiently on top of that. So, anyways. Like I said, would love for you to give Ampt a try. Come and sign up. It's free to play around, and we want to see what you can do. So anyways, that is it for this week. I hope that you will start playing around with some Next.js apps on Ampt that are being deployed to AWS. So